rumble in the Amazon jungle. The story of paradise poisoned.
I really believe they thought they could get away with it, but now 35 years later, it's coming back to haunt them.
And the peaceful little village caught between two armies. Just don't mention the war.
This is one of the locations we don't bring a lot of people to.
Hello, I'm Eric Campbell. Welcome to Foreign Correspondent. We start tonight in the Amazon rainforest, where local communities are taking on a US oil giant for decades of environmental destruction. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, a shaman begins an ancient healing ceremony. Alejandro is one of the last of the Kofan people to perform this ritual. The young have lost all faith in it. The old ways cannot stop the sickness now spreading across their land.
Nya menyuci bapak kusampi ketnya mengia sigi kasih jauh hati kasih cuto ya anya cuci kita upia nya meva atau hanya wa menggunakan skurtau saya sheki satu mes do si pansa tayu pi akan kis kasih ambil hanya pai se kasih ha satunya ini hamba kons umpi kakunda cu cuma hanya ha.
When Alejandro was a boy, this was one of the most pure environments on Earth. But in the 1960s came the discovery of oil. And with it came roads, production plants, pipelines, pollution, and some say the slow poisoning of the land and the people. Indigenous tribes have been devastated since the coming of oil, but now they've forced a giant US corporation back to answer for what it's done. Tonight, an extraordinary legal rumble in the jungle. This is what Texaco brought to the Amazon, a massive oil industry sliced into virgin rainforest. The company drew on 60 years of experience to show Ecuador how to tap its giant but remote reserves. Texaco didn't just operate the fields, it had a 1/3 share in them with the state oil company Petroecuador. Both companies made a lot of money, but the people who live here see a different legacy.
¿Al aplastar te duele? Sí. Mucho dolor, mamita. ¿Te quita el sueño el dolor? Sí. ¿Te quita el sueño el dolor?
Rosa Moreno is a community nurse in San Carlos, one of dozens of oil towns that have sprung up since the coming of Texaco. She treats what she claims is a staggering array of illnesses from contaminated water.
Pero mire, si las uñitas no están curadas, las uñitas tienen infección, esto ya se le cae otra vez. Ella tiene todito, costras, todito.
They range from serious skin infections like the blemishes on 8-year-old Carmita to alarmingly high rates of cancer. A detailed scientific study of San Carlos, published 4 years ago, blamed oil contamination for doubling the cancer rate. The victims include Rosa Moreno.
Entonces, como vuelvo y repito, o sea, yo también era bien inocente. Yo caminaba encima del petróleo y iba al río. Cuando yo vine a este pueblo no había agua, no había luz. Yo tenía que igual correr al río a bañarme, a lavar mi ropa. Igual yo sufro de una gastritis crónica. Yo tengo que estar cada año, tengo que hacerme endoscopía. Son 4 endoscopías que me habían hecho para poder controlar, o sea, el cáncer en mi estómago.
The main cause of contamination, residents say, is these toxic pits scattered throughout the oil fields. Texaco dug hundreds of them to store waste. They're alongside houses, near streams and rivers where people wash, and close to wells where people drink. Luis Jansa, an activist and community leader, says it's like being slowly poisoned.
Primero, por el mismo olor, como ahora se puede percibir, la gente tiene problemas de dolor de cabeza, mareo y sobre todo esto cuando llueve se llena y va hacia los ríos y donde la gente toma el agua y da de beber a sus animales, utiliza para sus labores domésticas y por esa razón se enferma.
Luis Jansa works for the Amazon Defense Front, a grassroots organization trying to assess the contamination and mobilize the community to fight back.
Yo estoy visitando siempre las comunidades y soy testigo y veo situaciones desastrosas, situaciones alarmantes y a veces me choca mucho porque me encuentro en una situación de no poder ayudarles. Nuestros compañeros, nuestros familiares, nuestros amigos, cientos, hombres, mujeres y niños han muerto. Eso es un crimen y eso me indigna y nos indigna a todos.
Many of the indigenous communities he visits, like this Kofun village, can still only be reached by boat. They are caught between tradition and development, but have received none of the oil wealth. The only tangible sign of the state, the village schoolhouse, was built long before oil was found. The children here face an even bleaker future than their parents did. Poverty and ill health have worsened since the 1960s. Life expectancy has fallen. But the villagers aren't seeking money for themselves from Texaco. They just want the company to clean up their land. Despite the efforts of locals like Luis Jansa, this might well have remained just another disgruntled community too poor to sue a US corporation. But for the past 12 years, a Manhattan lawyer, Steve Donziger, has fought their case in the US courts, the costs covered by a contingency agreement with a New York law firm. Now the case has shifted to Ecuador for judgment on a $6 billion claim.
This case represents the first time that rainforest dwellers have succeeded in forcing a major multinational oil company to come to where they live and to face charges in a court of law where the company actually has to submit itself to jurisdiction. It's never happened before.
When Texaco came here in the 1960s, it must have seemed unlikely it would ever be called on to answer for its actions. The rainforest was almost uninhabited, except for small and scattered groups of indigenous communities. The Ecuadorian authorities, with whom Texaco worked, paid little heed to the rights or wishes of the so-called Indians.
I think they thought that they could get away with this because there were very few people living here other than 5 indigenous groups. There were no roads, there were very few people. And I really believe they thought they could get away with it. But now, 35 years later, it's coming back to haunt them.
But the area didn't stay sparsely populated for long. The roads allowed the government to colonise the area with settlers. Tens of thousands moved in to work in the oil fields or farm the land. It was a potential legal nightmare by the time Texaco sold its holdings in 1992. But it made a deal with the Ecuador government it thought would protect it from future liability. Texaco agreed to spend $40 million on cleaning up a third of the contaminated sites. It's an extremely technical case, but it comes down to this. When the hundreds of drills were dug, the oily mud that was brought up was dumped in unlined pits like this around every drill site. Now, Texaco insists that everything was contained by the clay soil, but the local people say cancer-causing toxins leached out into surrounding wells and streams. On top of that, when the crude oil was separated, billions of gallons of leftover water was discharged into streams and rivers that feed the Amazon. Now, whether those practices were safe or deadly and who should pay the price is what this case is all about. The case is being fought around the frontier oil town of Lago Agrio near the Colombian border. Judge Efrain Novillo, who never travels without armed guards, is in charge of assessing the $6 billion claim. Today, the court is in session in a jungle clearing beside an oil rig and waste pit. It is a bizarre coming together of lawyers, guns and money. The opposing sides have their own camps, technical equipment, experts and advisors, all protected by Ecuadorian soldiers.
We are basically getting on the tours, just starting out. All right, take care, bye.
Among them are senior executives from Texaco, which recently merged with Chevron to become the world's 4th largest oil company. They're making regular trips from their air-conditioned headquarters to the 46-degree heat of this mosquito-ridden jungle. It's a sight Luis Llanza thought he would never see.
Y nos da mucho gusto ver sus caras porque ¿qué pueden decir frente a esto? Porque ellos dejaron toda esta contaminación y ellos son los responsables directos y por lo tanto para nosotros nos sentimos orgullosos de haberles sentado en la corte para que ellos vengan a responder y vengan también a respirar el aire contaminado, a pisar el suelo contaminado, a ver la gente afectada, que son nuestras pruebas irrefutables y contundentes.
Ricardo Rice Vega is Chevron Texaco's chief counsel. He's using the company's full resources to fight the case, which could have serious implications for its operations in more than 180 countries. Among the experts he's brought in is an expensive PR team doing damage control on the corporation's global reputation.
The records will show that we are a good corporate citizen and that we will prevail at the end.
Los peritos se encuentran presentes, ¿no?
Each session begins with a formal swearing-in of witnesses. Every word is recorded and transcribed. Today, the court is inspecting a pit from the original consortium for signs of contamination.
¿Tiene alguna conciencia?
Chevron Texaco's advocate, Dr. Adolfo Callejas, tells the court that Petro-Ecuador is responsible for any pollution. But the opposing lawyer, Dr. Monica Pareja, argues it was Texaco's decision to use substandard disposal methods just to save money.
es un ejemplo de la forma en la que la operadora Texaco realizó sus trabajos en el Ecuador. Porque si ellos sirvieron de modelo, me aterraría pensar cómo actuaban o actuarán las otras empresas petroleras.
Didn't Texaco just take advantage of lax third world standards because it was cheaper and they could get away with it?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The technology that we use here and the standards of operation that we use here on behalf of the owners of the consortium were the prevailing technology at the time we operated, basically in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
No way. You can go anywhere in the United States, you will never see an open-air toxic waste pit like this. Texaco knew better. Texaco already was not doing this in all other parts of the world, including the United States. And they knew that if they did this, it would create major health problems and environmental problems for years to come.
We have 4 pits in here, 2 oily pits, which were number 1 and 2.
Chevron Texaco insists it has done all the cleaning up it needs to.
I'm standing in the middle of the remediated pit number 2, and you can see this has been revegetated with grass.
The company's PR team took me to one of the waste pits that Texaco remediated when it left Ecuador.
You can see this area, it was tested and it was found to be okay.
But the plaintiffs claim all Texaco really did was hide the problem.
The agreement Texaco signed with the Ecuadorian government is a fraud. It's a sham. Basically, it required Texaco to remediate a certain portion of the pits, the open-air toxic waste pits that they left. But they never cleaned it other than to run dirt over the toxic waste pit without first cleaning it out. That's like treating skin cancer with makeup.
Are there any occasions when dirt was simply shoveled over the top?
No, and we have...
Chevron Texaco denies the cleanup was cosmetic, but at the same time, it claims the pits weren't dangerous to begin with.
Well, the existence of a pit does not pose necessarily health risk to human beings. That's for sure. The oil is actually contained, and there's no exposure per se to human beings. And one way to check this is to check the quality of groundwater. And we have done so, and the data is very good.
Why did you spend $40 million remediating then if there was no need to?
Because it's common practice to remediate and close pits that you have used.
Isn't that because you want to prevent the environmental and health hazards?
It's always, remediation is always about preventing things from the future. Otherwise it would not make any sense.
So there is a future risk, there is a potential you concede for some sort of health hazard or environmental hazard.
What I'm saying is that doing the remediation as any part of any operation in the world is part of our policy, is part of the way we do business.
While the lawyers argue the people are suffering from desperately inadequate medical facilities. Rosa Moreno is the only full-time health worker for a community of 4,000. She can offer nothing but sympathy for patients like Doña Rosita.
¿Le hicieron quimioterapias?
Sí, hicieron más de lo que ya sacaron más.
Y volvió a decaer.
Vuelta a decaer otro tiempito otra vez. Que es ya vuelta mal, de grave, ya que me moría, ya no.
She is dying of cancer of the uterus.
Así mismo. Ya vuelta me operaron. Ya vuelta dijeron que estoy mal de
los ovarios.
Sí, pues ahí ya de los ovarios. Que está ya con cáncer, que ya no hay remedio.
Doña Rosita's family of settlers built this house 22 years ago and dug a well behind it. Until 2 years ago, it was the only water they could drink.
No había agua donde coger y no hay, yo de mí no tengo agua. ¿A dónde? Hasta ahora mismo, ahora estamos ya donde es tarde de cocinar, de hacer. Antes no, traer, tomar esa agua. Poner limón, azúcar y tomar ya. Es agua gordo, era oliendo a gasolina o ese agua café, tujosa, sabor a químico, huele. Pero se tomaba. Eso se ha vivido años tomando esa agua. Años.
But Ricardo Rice Vega argues the health problems could be simply due to poverty.
In reality, most of the studies that have been presented by the plaintiffs so far recognize that they could not conclusively link the rate of cancer in this region with the oil production activities.
But you never can you? And scientifically, it's never possible to 100% prove something like that.
That's correct, but I think that allege that oil production activities conducted by Texaco 20, 30 years ago is the cause of a disease that have been alleged by the plaintiffs is not correct either.
The indigenous groups have struggled to retain their culture and identity since the oil boom brought settlement and pollution to their land. They may have a long wait for justice to be done. There's no guarantee that Chevron Texaco will abide by the court's decision, even if it loses the case and all appeals.
In the event of an adverse decision, I will have basically to take a look at the circumstance in which that decision was written and basically make my decision then.
So you can't guarantee that if you do lose, you will respect the order of the court?
I would have to see the conditions again.
But to many, the fact the case has come this far is already a victory.
This case sends a powerful message to oil companies all over the world. You cannot go in to developing countries and use substandard technology just because you think these people do not have the money or power to take you to a court of law and hold you accountable.
Whatever happens will be too late for Doña Rosita.
Uno inocente no ha sabido, no se ha dado cuenta para eso guardar de uno que ha venido siquiera a cocinar el agua, nada. Todo comiendo, todo ahora. Es nada donde ya no digo todo arruinado, todo terminado. Todos mis órganos botados, todo lo que está con cáncer sacado, llevado. Todo, ya no hay nada.
Like so many others, she can only wish she never came to a poisoned paradise. And now to the Korean Peninsula for a look at a different sort of stoush, this time between communism and capitalism.